take a classic car that would get junked anyway, cut off the body from that, cut off the antiquated old stuff, and put it on something that is new. So you get advantages of a body swap or a chassis swap usually are you get better everything. Modern suspension, AC, heat.
A body swap, 90% of the time, the only consideration, and not even, I'm going to change that to 65% of the time. The only thing they worry about is the wheelbase length.
Yes.
Nothing else works. Nothing else. And then their proportions are all wrong, and trying to close it up and make it a viable car, that's why they all die.
You don't want to be sitting in your seat and your steering wheel is, off center to your body, or even your pedal position.
That is so
like if
funny.
you need to modify, I'm like, obviously visually I'm exaggerating.
Welcome to another episode of Modify with TrickFactory Customs. If this is your first time watching, we are a custom shop based here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And we started this podcast because we love to talk about cars and we build really cool cars. My name is Elvis.
Tim?
Rob.
Awesome. And on this episode, we are discussing body swaps or chassis swaps. And
one.
No, because I have some glorious opinions on this, but Tim does not. It's the opposite. I think it's going to be a lot of fun because if you don't know what a body swap is or a chassis swap is, it's when someone takes. I wish we could split two cars apart, but imagine this LaFerrari. Someone takes it off and then puts on the body of a GTR, a Nissan GTR, or
that was the worst possible combination of vehicles.
That is a crazy analogy.
Let's try something better, like a 67 Camaro body on a modern Camaro.
Yes, so something like that.
They're sacred, don't mess with them.
Yeah, that's blasphemy. Get out of here. End this podcast.
That would be a cool swap, though. Come on.
No, it wouldn't.
That'd be
it would not. The debate is very, very, very minimal.
I know. So we're going to be discussing all of that today. I think it's going to be interesting because I feel like we've seen a shift in the modern day or today about doing that. A lot of people seem to be doing that more often than not. And so we just wanted to dive into that. But before we get started,
his opinion, he's just waiting.
He's just like waiting to let out
his
everything.
opinion.
So before we dive into that topic, we're just going to tell you guys how our weeks have been.
What has your week been, Tim? How has your week been,
How has the week
Tim?
treated
What have you
Tim?
been up to?
Elvis gets to participate because we share a couple of email accounts, so he gets to see the back and forth of just emails that could be like a 2-minute phone call, but it's like a half a day email conversation that ultimately ends up in hey, we should schedule a phone call. Why don't we just start with a phone call? And then just chasing parts and checking back orders and tracking number, tracking stuff to see what it's at so we can set a schedule and just literally waiting.
It's a lot of things happening.
Lambo happening.
We've the Lamborghini project that we're doing for fun.
Dealing with customer personalities because I get to field all the phone calls. So that has been a challenging week, but that's a whole nother podcast. I think we have one talking about what it's actually like having a custom shop.
Yeah, so if you're interested in that, let us know.
Yeah. Myself, I'm obviously a lot more hands-on in this shop, and so my last week has been pretty much all in on the Skylark again. But I've been working on the trunk, fuel cell.
And then you also did the engine mounts, or you were working on the engine mounts right now.
That's kind of where I ended my week, is building the engine mounts, because we've had the Wagner supercharged engine in house now for a little bit, but we don't want to fabricate around that.
No, that's too precious.
We have to build our own in-house headers and everything for it. We have a kind of like a sacrificial LS with a 4L80 on it, so we just put that in the chassis. So I'm making the engine and trans mounts for that now, and then we're going to get into doing headers and the rest of the car. I need to build the whole center of the floor pan, trans tunnel, the whole thing. So it's been good. It's been a good week.
That's
looking
awesome.
forward to moving into the next week too.
Yeah, and we're also looking forward to the next plan for the Lambo. So this past weekend, we did the
cold
turbo.
side.
Yeah, the cold side of the turbo. But it's all plumbed in now, temporarily for the most part, because we're going to be modifying some of the mounts and all of that for the intercoolers when we cut the body of the Tahoe off. And so what is in it for the next few weeks, I guess?
We have a little bit of more plumbing, and then up next is the ECU, so that we can put a tune in it and start making power. Because right now, obviously, we can't really put boost into it on a stock ECU, and every light is on in the dash. We just got to clean up a bunch of stuff, get some bigger injectors, new intake. And well, actually, I think we plan on blowing the guts out of the intake that we have first.
Yeah, the stock truck intake manifold
Can't hold a lot of pressure.
Well, we're going to find out exactly how much pressure.
That's what we heard. So we're going to test that theory. How much boost pressure can we apply to a stock truck manifold?
Scientific tests.
Yes, for testing purposes only. And then after we blow that one, which we intend to, we are going to be putting a
fabricated
aluminum intake manifold onto it.
Very nice.
Yeah, we'll go from there. So we'll probably have to modify a little bit of our cold side tubing just to sort of accommodate the difference in throttle body height and whatever.
Yeah, that's for future TFC.
That's future TFC stuff, because it's just for fun. We don't want to like overwhelm ourselves. I think we touched on this last time we talked about this. We don't want to overwhelm ourselves with getting too deep into it. We just want to enjoy the process of this.
With that said, we are going to dive into today's topic of conversation, which is body swaps.
Ooh.
Yes. So body swaps, are they
stupid? Yeah.
Are they the be all to end all?
Oh my gosh, no. But like I mentioned earlier, body swaps I feel like are becoming I've been seeing them more and more often.
Okay,
and
wait.
Okay.
We're seeing more and more body swaps started.
Yes.
We've seen very few of them finished.
That is true. Why are body swaps not finished?
Because it's stupid.
Oh my gosh.
I think he might need
Could you
to
explain
elaborate
why?
a little bit.
Why are body swaps stupid according
we have
to
a car in
you?
a shop right now that could technically be defined as a body swap.
Yeah, I know. Our Urus
Is
Tahoe
or the Skylark.
or the Skylark is also a body swap.
Technically,
It's not really technically a body swap.
It's a
kinda
body
is.
swap.
It's not. The chassis was built specifically for that body.
Yes, but it's not the same chassis that it
So I
came
think we
from
need to
the
define
factory.
what a body swap
with.
is first.
Yes. So what is a
That's
body
not
swap?
a body swap. That just has a new chassis built specifically for that car. All you're doing is taking one chassis out and putting another better, more modernized chassis in its place. You're not cutting.
that's chassis swap.
A chassis swap is completely different than a body
So
swap.
Roadster Shop spec chassis designed specifically for that very reason.
And it essentially is a bolt-in.
Yeah.
Unless you decide to make some changes beyond what... But they do make a spec chassis that bolts directly in.
Yeah, and I mean it's purpose
You're
built
not
for that
bolting a chassis
reason.
out of a E30 M3 into a Miata.
Yeah.
No
I mean,
chance.
you can make mounts for the bolt and stuff.
No.
I think that they are the same thing. So
They're
what
not
do you
the same
think,
thing.
Rob? They're not the same thing?
No, I don't think they're the same thing. It's very technically it's different in its own little ways, but I would say generally speaking, it's kind of the same. But the spec chassis,
I'd say the
way that we went about with the Skylark is not the way that chassis was intended to be used.
Yeah.
And so I would say that there's a gray area in between.
Yeah.
That is kind of a
Tim
body
is not
swap.
going to agree.
And I would say that
No.
maybe
They're not.
only because you could take any chassis and do the exact same thing to that Skylark, and it would be the exact same result as what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
It just happens that one was intended to be a direct bolt-on, but we didn't use it like that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear your view.
Okay, so for me, a body swap and a chassis swap are exactly the same thing.
No.
Because you are taking what was a stock car, cutting the body off for the most part, or sometimes bolting it on and off, and putting it on something that it was not intended to have from the factory. I think if it doesn't come from the factory that way, anything you do to the chassis, if you're taking out what was under the car before, is a body swap or a chassis swap. I think it's exactly the same thing.
It's not the same. Not even similar.
Gosh. Okay.
Which is the argument as to why none of those cars get finished.
I've seen
What do you think the
quite a
likelihood
few.
of putting a chassis under a car that's meant for the car is they get finished. A body swap, 90% of the time, the only consideration, and not even, I'm going to change that to 65% of the time. The only thing they worry about is the wheelbase length.
Yes.
Nothing else works. Nothing else. And then their proportions are all wrong, and trying to close it up and make it a viable car. That's why they all die. Because all they're worried about is, oh, will the wheels fit in the hole? Yeah. And then the rest of them, nothing works.
No,
Nothing.
I think it is the exact opposite. I think everything works for the most part because
If you want to get in a car and your dash is 2 feet long because it doesn't fit,
again, it depends on how you make
you got to
that
put your
work.
feet in the corner because the tunnel's too wide for the car that you're putting it in.
It all depends on how you make that work.
No.
But for the most part, a lot of the ones that I've seen, because I follow this page, it's a body swap page. I think you follow the page too.
Yeah, I do. How many finished body swaps have you seen on that page?
I've seen quite
How
a
many?
few.
Give me an example.
My gosh, like there was a Volkswagen. There was I think it was what
I've
did they
been
call the
following
square
it for
body?
Probably 6 months. I've seen maybe 2 finished cars on that page
But the most important thing I think
out
is
of 100.
that people are even starting, because I think it is just awesome to be able to take a classic car that, I don't know, would get junked anyway, cut off the body from that, cut off the antiquated old stuff and put it on something that is new. So you get, so the advantages of a body swap or a chassis swap usually are you get better everything compared to where you started from. And so I think, because if you're doing, for example, let's go with your route, a chassis swap from like a roadster swap chassis. Sure, like the chassis are amazing, but they're also expensive.
But what's the purpose of it?
Because I want to do a body swap to my car, which is why I thought of this topic, and Tim and I couldn't agree, and so we were like, we have to make a podcast about this. But so I have a 1960 Jaguar Mark II. Initially, I was going to do just an engine swap, but when I looked at the cost of doing the engine swap and upgrading everything else on that chassis, because it is not a nice chassis right now. It's there is rust on it. Underneath, there's a lot of rust. You can see holes through the floor. Some of the parts have been picked out of it as well, and so it's just not a nice chassis, but it's a good shell because the actual body of the car doesn't have any rust on it.
Yeah, and you like the aesthetic design of what that car looks to be.
But right? Unfortunately, I can't afford buying a whole or pretty much doing a whole restoration on that car. And I can't afford buying like a 20, 30 or having a custom chassis made for it. Like 50, even can even extend to the hundreds by the time you're done.
And I think a lot of this decision process is based on like in the 60s, even if you upgraded and did all the things to this Jaguar that was made for that, at the end of the day, you still have a fairly antiquated setup. Like unless you completely re-engineer and design everything about it, you're going to end up with something that's 1960 spec.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so
it kind of lends into, hey, maybe I should just do a body swap.
Yeah. And so that was my reasoning.
I think there's a lot of sense in that way, especially with a car that was probably never great. But if you really love the way it looks, that makes sense.
Yeah. And that's why I'm doing it.
But knowing that it's not cheap.
No.
Like, don't think like doing an engine swap and like, some upgrades to your existing car is way cheaper than doing a body swap.
It depends.
No.
It depends.
No, because
what
I think the misconception is like just putting a body onto some other existing modern car chassis, because you got the driveline and all the things.
Yeah.
You connected the dots, the floor pan and everything from the new car meets the body of the old car. And maybe you're lucky and the interior dimensions work in that shell. Most likely they don't. So you're doing completely custom interior. There's a lot of money to be spent there. Like, that's not cheap. And more often than not, dimensions of new cars are way different than they are from old cars. Even just thinking about like the cowl placement the strut tower placement on a new car completely different than an older car.
And way taller.
True.
And so there's a lot
Plus-
of those things that make most chassis swaps a failure. Not chassis swaps, body swaps.
Body swaps.
There's a lot of research to be had doing a body swap, because it's not a willy-nilly thing. You don't just, fly by the seat of your pants doing that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You end up having something that never gets finished. Or even if it does become a driving automobile, there is a freaking laundry list of compromises that are there, and you're just like, and it eats you up. You're like, oh, this is not as good as what it was like before I did this monumental amount of body swap work. You're like, oh, this
Plus,
sucks.
you're only ever driving whatever you swapped it onto.
Which is awesome.
It
Which
can
is
be.
amazing.
If it
It can
starts
be.
out as something
Yeah.
awesome.
Like if you take that Jaguar and imagine you put that on like, I don't know, something kick-ass like a M3.
Ooh, that would be sick. Well, I didn't go for the M3 route because I'm
But I
balling
mean,
on a budget here.
So if your donor was something that was like seriously badass, then
Yeah.
your 60s Jaguar is going to be probably the best 60s Jaguar that
amazing.
exists in the world.
Yeah.
As far as its functionality, but I mean, still, there's probably going to be a lot of compromises.
So my plan,
Most of it's interior.
my plan is to put a BMW 328 Xi
Yeah.
under the Jag. It's all-wheel drive. That's why I got it, because I want a classic car or a classic looking car that I can drive all year round, even in the middle of winter.
Yeah, and
in a
especially
snowstorm.
where we live.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and so that was my initial plan for it. And again, I don't have like $100,000 to blow on a project car or like a full chassis or full restoration or even more.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can get 328 XIs for like less than 10 grand easy. And I mean, I know, there's going to be things I'm going to need to do, like figure out the interior and even how to graft both parts together. And even the cowl the cowl part of things is also important, because initially I wasn't thinking about that. But after seeing a guy, I think he tried to swap it was a 190E with an A45 AMG.
Yeah.
And so after he cut it apart, he like, oh crap, the cowl doesn't match up with the other car.
I'll guarantee you, your BMW
Defender.
is 6 inches wider than your Jag. So your steering wheel is going to be touching the.
No, the
passenger
BMW
window.
is 2 inches wider than the Jag.
You're talking track width though, but like a lot of the
Body
things
width.
like body width in areas of major concern, like your major A-pillar areas, and all of those. Old classic car spec was like seriously small compared to new age stuff. So that's going to be like, now your dash from the E46 is going to be too wide to fit.
E90.
E90, I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's not going to fit in your Jag.
Yeah,
Which is going to put your steering wheel touching your driver's door glass, because you're going to clip the ends and not move the column, or you got to narrow the dash, but you also got to shift the steering wheel over into your seating position. It's just going to spiral.
Nah, I think it'll be fine.
So I think that's what a lot of
So did all those other guys. That's why they're all for sale on.
I think details like that are what will make or break this project for anybody. If anybody wants to do a body swap, you're going to have to do a lot of detailed research to find out whether or not because that's a really big issue that plagues a lot of cars. Like you don't want to be sitting in your seat and your steering wheel is off center to your body, or even your pedal
That is
position.
so
Like if
funny.
you need to modify, I'm like, obviously visually I'm exaggerating, but like
I'm trying to imagine
but like
it.
honestly, it's some cars actually come with a slight off center, or even from the factory. So I mean, it just gets exaggerated sometimes. And those are a lot of the things. Like those are a lot of those compromises that end up being had. So I think if you just automatically said, I am not going to run anything from the interior of the E90 in my 60s Jaguar, and you just put like all your bits where they needed to be, built, modified, or built a whole new floor pan
that's not a body swap anymore.
But see, now you're
Now
kind
you're
of
building a
in the
custom car.
same in the
that's too
same
much.
situation like I am with my Datsun, my Z.
So what are you doing to your Z? What is your Z?
See,
again?
I
For people that don't know.
because I was wanting to do just like an engine swap or something like that, and I actually even considered doing a body swap on that car too.
Oh, okay.
Because I used to drive a G35 coupe, and I was like,
Oh.
dope. You know, I'll just put a VQ35. Maybe I'll just buy a donor car, a 350Z, body swap that. I have all that the great modern tech, and I was like, no, this isn't going to work
Why did you turn away from it?
for all those same reasons. None of those dimensions work, and it's
Yeah.
just too much. You end up having a completely you go like race car spec in the interior. You know,
I think you end
caged.
up just transferring your workload to a different place.
That's
Like
what
you're
it
How
is.
do you
moving
mean?
it. Well, instead of doing this over here, you're putting all this immense amount of work into sort of fixing things that aren't quite right, moving things and repositioning things and relocating things, because the amount of stuff in your BMW is massive compared to the Jag, and you have no place to put it.
True.
So you got to start finding places to put all these things and more brackets. And then what I see a lot happens, and why people end up getting jammed up, is like simple things that like, okay, what do I do with this now? And that turns into a 3-day project or a 4-day project. Whereas we don't let ourselves, we just start from nothing and put it where it needs to be. So we're always moving forward and making stuff. Whereas that stuff, people get stuck with like, I have to use this because it came with the car.
Yeah.
And it could be something stupid like an overflow tank. Like, oh, where am I going to put this overflow tank? Because this is the BMW when I have to use it. Me, I'll throw in garbage to get a
Get
different
a new
one that
one.
fits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas that you'll spend, and then it just starts looking like because you're trying to repurpose all this stuff that then the packaging gets whacked looking. And some of these cars, you know, they look decent. Then they pop the hood and you're just like, oh my God, what in the hell is that?
That is true. I've seen that. I feel like in a lot of
A lot, because the packaging, it just doesn't work. There's too much guts to put in there. It's like,
Yeah.
what do they say? It's like 5 pounds of sausage in a 10-pound bag, or 10 pounds of
10
sausage.
pounds in a 5
What?
pound.
5-pound bag.
I've never heard
Yeah, I know.
Like, it's ridiculous.
No,
Okay.
that's true though, and this is a really big concern. That's part of it. I mean, there's
So when you're
so
doing it
many things.
yourself and you have nothing but time, go for it. Knock yourself out. But to get me to do it, it's not going to be cheaper. It's going to cost you twice as much.
Wow.
Like, for sure. Because it's simple little things. And if you're trying to make it right, then it just starts adding up. Oh, we got to move the column over an inch. And then next thing you know, that's whatever. But if you're at home and it takes you a week to correct that, that's great. But it doesn't make sense financially unless you're working for free.
Yeah.
Really, and there's no reason why, like, you can do all of those mods. Like, if you wanted to have like that interior, that dash, that console, everything, you could totally make it work. But you're going to modify all of that stuff. You're whipping out some pretty modern tech, panel bonds and
I would
things
say
like
you
that
need
to make
more
things,
ability.
3D printing,
More ability
I think you need more ability.
than even doing it the other way.
Yeah, because you got to touch on every single thing. You got wiring, you got mechanical, you got upholstery, you got everything to do. Literally everything.
Yeah, and,
And
you're
then if
working
you're just
within
trying to
a
cram it
constraint
in-
too.
Yeah, and within those constraints, so you got to be even more creative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's easier just to go full race car.
Exactly.
Just
Cut everything out.
gut it out, fucking put your things wherever you want it, and just send it.
No, I am thinking of making a custom like dash for it, but still using some of the E90's components, like the gauge cluster and I don't know, what's it called? Just the rest of the dashboard, like a lot of the dashboard, but just making it kind of similar to the Jag's dash, but like tying it in somehow. But because I kind of like the challenge, honestly. Like, to me, like,
Yeah.
I like it, trying to figure out things like that, because that's what gives me energy, and that's where I get my, I don't know, boost of energy from, I guess.
I mean, that's
trying to figure all of that
that's
out.
That's part of your metric of life.
Yeah.
You know, that's what you're working for, and that's cool, man. I respect that. It's admirable. If you make it through to the end, kudos to you, man. That's awesome. And like, no kidding, man. Like,
Yeah.
I want to help you along the way to make sure that you do make it, because I don't want to see you fail.
Right now, on the world scale of body swaps, we could have a first, second, and third place prize, because that's probably how many will actually get finished.
No, I hope. I mean, I can't start it now, obviously, but because I have literally so many other projects to do. But I hope to maybe start my body swap in the next year, and we'll see what happens. And I'm giving myself less than a year to complete it. Hopefully it happens. I mean, we have a child on the way, so that might affect things. But
I think that's going to impact things. Plus, you got to start making that plan and taking measurements.
True. Yes. So we'll see what
So
happens.
reference the previous podcast, the one before the last one, about making a plan and following it through, because I think
Exactly.
you may find before you even get to the cutting part that you're going to have some big issues that you need to address.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
But you'll have started off on the right path by
Right.
making the plan.
Yes. And that's honestly what I learned in the...
Yeah, put the grinder down,
Yeah.
pick up a pencil.
Yes.
Yeah. Curb the enthusiasm just a little tiny
I know,
bit.
because it's almost too exciting.
'Cause
I'm like,
it's-
oh my gosh,
you're
I need to
fired
cut
up, man.
something.
Yeah.
Give me an...
Obviously, you're fired up, dude. It's,
Yeah.
it's exciting. Who doesn't want to do that? It's
Yeah.
awesome.
Another problem that people might also run into is registering these cars, because how do you register it? I know in the States, there's like some states like Florida, you can title anything. But with us living in Canada or in the BC area, like how do you even register that? Do you know, Tim? Because you register
Well,
the car with
I know there's an option to do like a U-built, as though you built the car from scratch. And I also know that it goes on the greatest percentage of which vehicles you used.
How do you mean?
Like if you use the chassis out of that car, it comes with the VIN.
Okay.
So then I believe in the States you have to use like a minimum of a 20% of the original chassis to be able to use the original VIN
Oh,
for whatever's underneath of it.
that's
So-
interesting.
That's pretty cool.
But I mean, everywhere is different. I don't know everywhere, but I know here, if you rebodied it, it'd be whatever the chassis is, not necessarily the body.
So they don't give you a new VIN or something?
No, you can apply. Like, say you're to use two road-off cars and you put them together and you create your own car, you can go get a U-built title. It'd kind
Oh.
of fall under like a kit car sort of classification.
Oh, so like, do you need any specific, like, for example, me that's just doing it as a hobbyist, like, do you need any like licenses to do that or not?
That's where the U-built part of it comes in. You have to pass like a safety inspection and all. They may require you to go get certain things like non-destructively tested. Like when we used to build motorcycle frames.
Non-destructively tested?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
What?
Yeah.
Like when we used to build
It's
motorcycle frames,
non-destructive, so
they would
they
X-ray
scan
them.
it, X-ray it, do
They
whatever.
scan it.
They can
And make sure your welds are sound, right? I
Oh,
mean, if you're
shoot.
building something that is, I mean, it's a several thousand pounds of automobile, right? It's a dangerous piece of equipment if not built correctly. And so, yeah, you scan that, make sure that it works, make sure it's not going to break itself apart and kill anybody.
So there's
Yeah.
different levels to it. Like if they look at it and they're like, we got to send that out, then they can send it out and make you get a full-on vehicle inspection. They can get your welds tested. They can do all kinds of stuff.
Oh my
but
gosh.
I don't necessarily think it goes to that level all the time, but I know they can do it if they want to do it.
Dang. Okay.
Yeah, back in the day, like when Tim and I used to build choppers a lot, because of our level of welding certification and insurability, we were at a higher rating of being able to test.
Yeah, they trust your stuff.
than what they were. So they're like, oh yeah, yeah. If you say
probably
it's
know-
good,
know
then
more than me.
It's probably good. And so
Yeah.
here you go.
So they can do that, and then you go for they'll give you a U-built status or like a
Interesting.
BC assigned VIN.
Wow. And there's no like, because you guys have probably dealt with similar situations in the past, is there any problem with like insuring it?
Oh.
Or do you state your own value of the car?
Well, at that time you would have, but now I think you have to have an appraised value
Oh.
to get it insured. Like you can say it's anything you want, but they can contest it at the end unless you've had it properly appraised.
Yeah, and pretty much everything that we build nowadays, we get like a
We get
third
an
party
appraisal right away, just
Appraisal
for insurance.
get that done anyways, and yeah, just makes that whole insurance part of it, I think, a lot smoother
Easier
too.
to
And
deal
like,
with.
I mean, there's it's a badge of honor,
But
really.
as far as like the way things are going now, I think you would want some sort of description on your insurance.
How do you
Because the
mean?
way things have progressed now, they have license plate scanners. So if it
Yes.
scans it and it's like 98 BMW and it's a Jag,
Yeah.
you're going to have problems. So I think you'd have to have some kind of descriptive put in there, or at least you'd want to. Otherwise, you're going to be pulled over all
Like
the time.
even without
That's a valid
so it's, I don't understand what you mean. I understand what you mean, but when you say descriptive, is that after you've done all the like you built thing or not?
Well, I think you might want to do a U-built status.
Yeah.
Rather than just trying to roll around on your BMW.
Yeah, no, that's
plates.
not safe.
So
That's
you'd probably
not safe.
want to get some kind of proper designation for it, just so you're not pulled over all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Just make your life easier.
Easier,
that way.
yeah.
You know,
I'm growing older. If I was younger, I would be like, I'm just gonna risk it.
nobody's got
Bend
time
it.
for being pulled over by the feds. Come on.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that. It's
Yeah.
embarrassing.
Awesome. So, like, what is the Skylark gonna go under then? What's the title? It's gonna be the same
Skylark,
thing.
yeah.
You're not gonna like be. How is insurance gonna work? Because it is gonna be very different from a stock Skylark value wise and all of that.
Well, you just get an appraisal for it afterwards.
Okay, and is it like an independent company that appraises
Yeah.
this, or okay?
Yeah, you'll send it out to an independent appraisal, and then they'll use that as the insured value of the vehicle. But that one's not a body swap, and we're not combining two different VINs together to create a single one. That one is made specifically for that. And then in the motorcycle world, there's different levels to it, where it's like you would get a manufacturer statement of origin for the chassis, and then when we go, so then we get another one for the motor, and we get another one for all the major components. And then when you go and you've created the vehicle and you have it inspected and they give you an assigned VIN, that encompasses all those different pieces.
That's interesting. Okay.
But because this is made for it, we're not technically, and in this era of cars, it's not an issue at all.
And what about Lambo Tahoe?
Lambo Tahoe, the only problem we're going to have with that one is the fact that it looks like a Lambo, but it's a Tahoe. So again, we're going to be pulled over all the time.
Yeah.
But what
So
we're doing
who
with
knows?
that,
Like, you know, if we actually drive this thing on the street, like at least once or twice, like we intend to, then maybe we would have to do the U-built thing too. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out as we get along into it.
Yeah.
but in reality, that thing's not street legal. It never passed.
It doesn't have doors, doesn't have a windshield.
No, I mean, if you guys are listening or you're watching, when you see the wheels and tires and the long travel suspension and everything that's going to be going
Essentially
into
a
that,
dedicated off-road
It's
vehicle.
massive.
it's monstrous.
40-inch tires. Like, I don't know if you guys can see it, but back there's like a hint of tire back there. That is what it is. So
I would think with that vehicle just being so exaggerated and ridiculous, it's probably not ever going to be on the streets in that respect.
Yeah.
We probably never have to worry about it.
Yeah, it's not going to progress to that point. So.
No.
yeah.
Off-road use only.
Body swap or kit car?
Body swap. Ooh. Oh, wait. What do you mean?
What's the difference?
Between a kit car and a body swap?
That's a pretty good question.
That's a very good question, actually.
What's the difference between a kit car and a body swap?
A kit car, for the most part, when I hear kit car, I mean, there are different types, but when I hear kit car, I automatically go Fiero.
Right.
And like people trying to rebody it, but it never just looks right. It always just looks terrible.
Sometimes they do.
Yeah, there's some pretty close ones.
Some kits are like pretty legit. They're using like factory components.
So is there a difference between trying to improve the drivability of your car as opposed to trying to improve the appearance of your car? Because we all know the negative connotations of having a kit car. Does it apply the same for doing that?
I don't know. I don't think so, because I want to improve everything. Or no, I want to keep the looks of it, but
Yeah, but you're
increase
removing its
drivability.
soul. It's not what it is anymore. What are you driving?
I'm driving
Are you driving a half of a BMW or all of a Jaguar?
I'm driving a Jaguar Mark III. No, Mark 328i. XI.
Nice.
Yeah, or Jag MW or something. I'll figure out a name for it, but it's going to be, I think it'll be good because, again, I have all the suspension, modern suspension from the BMW. I have AC, I have heat, I have all of these things without having to think of those things as each separate things and add to the car when it's already
You'll
there.
be thinking about those things. Don't worry.
Nah, I think it'll be fine.
As soon as you
So-
try to put that radiator and condenser behind that Jag grill, you're gonna be messing with AC.
No, but you
You're
just
gonna
make
think it's
a-
gonna be easier to put.
You just bring
in the other one.
get a new radiator. Like, that's easy to do. Like, get a new radiator, replumb it. That's so easy.
Just get a new everything, and then
No,
it makes
it's
perfect
just
sense.
it's just a radiator.
Once you start going to that point, it's almost
Why not just get a chassis?
No,
Yeah, or maybe you should have just did a motor swap.
Yeah.
Nah, that's like I still need
But
a
it's all
lot of
part of
stuff.
it, right?
Yeah,
It's all part of it.
I don't want a 60 because another part of this chassis before we end, another part of why I want to do this is because the Jag stuff is hard to find. Like you have to get almost everything from like England,
Yeah.
and it takes
You gotta
like
call
such a
up
long
Nigel.
time exactly to get here. And I'm like, I just want to be able to go to a store, buy the parts that I need, and come back out and change it the same day.
See, the's a lot to be said for that.
But you could
And
go
that
front
makes
rear
sense.
subframe and a motor swap and have all of it. But you're taking the long way.
Good to know.
Well, I mean, that's the other part of that decision, because that's not an easy thing to do as well. That's not easy.
I'd say if you think you can do a body swap, you should be able to do front and rear subframes.
Well, I would say that
It's right
definitely
within the
in
same
that.
skill set, but
Should be.
probably faster.
Faster? No
Oh
way.
yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
definitely faster.
Way
Really?
Oh yeah. If you think about how many linear feet of welding you would have to do to connect a body to an existing floor pan chassis, doing a body swap, that's a lot. And then now you're talking about like the structural integrity of certain things, so you have to add a few pieces here. You're chopping and you're doing your thing. But if you think about how much that is related to doing like a subframe swap, it's considerably less. But you're having to do structural integrity build up in that.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
So
It's different.
let us know what you guys think about body swaps, chassis swaps, kit cars, everything in the comments below.
This is an ongoing conversation. We
Yeah.
talk about this often.
This
Yeah.
consumes half of our lunch conversation.
Yeah. We all have our own very strong opinions on this and why we would do certain things. Elvis is very optimistic,
Passionate,
very passionate.
and I eagerly anticipate watching his learning curve.
Yeah, it's gonna be glorious.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It is going to
gonna
be
be fun.
glorious.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see if I say the same thing 2 years from now. So
No, I mean,
Document it.
I know, yeah.
you're-
I
you're
document
the-
it too. So
See, at one point in time, Tim and I were in the exact same place that you were, and we learned the hard way.
We're trying to pass our knowledge on to you.
We're trying to
and share it.
impart on you, Elvis.
yeah.
You should do this instead. Are you sure you want to do that?
yeah, we'll see.
But it's awesome, and it's definitely inspiring for us all in the shop. So,
oh, thank you. Okay.
all right.
Thank you guys for watching this video. If you liked it, or also thank you for listening to this podcast. If you like to give it a thumbs up, and also rate the podcast 5 stars if you can, so we can move up in podcast ratings. And we will see you guys next week. Bye.